Beep, 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 beep. Boring, 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 boring. All right, Dylan, what episode are we on?
We are on episode 11, Haven.
Yeah. I'll start with the plot summary, and then we'll get this over with and forget that it ever happened. Okay, it's not that bad, but... okay. So the plot summary basically is that the Enterprise is heading to Haven, which is a super peaceful planet renowned for its peace and super peacefulness, and nothing will possibly go wrong. Troy is ambushed when they get to the planet with an arranged marriage that she has apparently been trying to avoid with her service on the Enterprise. Her mother, Loxana, which, fun fact, she is Gene Roddenberry's wife, is the actress who plays her.
Also, an interesting little production fact. They haven't actually established it yet in this series, but she's also the voice of the ship's computer in later episodes.
Yeah. So anyway, her mother, Loxana, and Troy's husband-to-be's family, they beam aboard, and a series of increasingly boring dialogues ensue, including Troy's groom, whose name is Wyatt, I believe. His name was Wyatt. Yeah, his name is Wyatt. He reveals that he's seen a woman's face his whole life and doesn't know who she is, and for the longest time assumed that it was Troy until he met her. And he makes all these paintings and drawings of this mystery woman. And then the Enterprise is notified by the planet Haven that a mysterious vessel has entered the system and refuses to communicate, and because they're allies with the Federation, the Enterprise has to intervene and figure out what's going on. And the unknown ship is revealed to be from a race called the Terralians, who are nearly extinct because of a deadly plague that they created in their past. So the planet's terrified that they'll get to the planet and beam down and infect everybody with their plague. The Enterprise eventually pulls the Terralians into a tractor beam, and they receive a communication revealing that Wyatt's magic art woman is aboard the Terralian ship. And then he beams himself over, and the Terralian ship leaves, and stuff ends and things. And also somewhere in there, Troy's parents and Wyatt's parents fight for a while, and then Troy yells at them, and then they're fine. That's about as trimmed down of a summary as I can give.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty accurate. I'm actually glad I didn't have to write the plot summary for this episode. Because if you haven't noticed, for the past few episodes, me and Tyler have switched off with the plot summary. Like every other episode I do it, and every other episode he does it. So I'm kind of glad I didn't have to do this one, because this one would have been hard.
At least it's not honor.
That's true.
Right, so fun trivia time, new section before we start. Fun trivia time. This is the second and final time that Will Riker is referred to as Bill in the TV series. And it was so odd that for a second, it took me a minute. It took me a second to realize that they were referring to Riker when they were saying Bill. I was like, who the hell's Bill? Because they don't call him that. Only 2 episodes, and this is the second and last time. And this was also the 3rd episode produced after the pilot, which was aired much later. And it kind of shows, because to me it looks and feels a lot like the first couple episodes did.
Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense, because, yeah, everything is very...
It's got
odd.
that early episode pacing going on.
Yep.
And then it also creates errors in continuity, because in the last episode that we reviewed, Deanna was visiting her home on Beta Z to visit her mother. But in this episode, Deanna says that she hasn't seen her mother for a long, long time.
Yeah, that is true. I do remember them referencing that she was away from the ship for whatever reason.
Yep. And then also, this is an Emmy-winning episode, Dylan. Did you know that?
What?
Richard Saber was nominated for an Emmy Award. Oh, not winning. Nominated. Excuse me. He was nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Hairstyling for a Series in 1988.
Oh, okay. I honestly... like, it was like, how the hell did this episode get Emmy? And then it was for hairstyles, so I was like, oh, okay. Whatever.
So can I start this time with the goods? And I don't remember who started last time.
I believe I did, so yeah, go right ahead.
I have one good, and that is that Loxana Troy is always amusing when she's on screen. She shows up a lot in Star Trek, and she's always funny.
Yeah, she's like that delicate balance of character where she's obnoxious, but in an entertaining way instead of just being obnoxious.
The free-spiritedness of her character is pretty refreshing compared to some of the really stodgy people in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my good.
Yeah, I had one good as well. And that was that we finally get some detail into Riker and Troy's past relationship. Because if you remember from the very first episode, one of the things we mentioned was that when Riker...
the telepathic romantic scene.
They have that weird moment, yeah, where she calls him...
Imzadi! Yeah.
Okay. Settle down there, Tyler. But Troy telepathically speaks to Riker in the very first episode, calling him Imzadi, and it's this bizarre, kind of out of place little bit that doesn't really get referenced again until, like, now. And in the episode, there's a scene with Riker and Troy on the holodeck where Riker reveals that Imzadi means my beloved, I think he says it.
Yeah, this leads right into one of my bad /sillies. I couldn't figure out where to place it, but continue.
But yeah, and it's explained that when, I guess, a half Betazoid, half human, or just even Betazoid, like, they get close enough with someone, they develop some kind of telepathic link or something. It's all kind of wishy-washy, honestly. But it was nice to actually get some kind of closure to that little bit, because it was just, they sort of just left it hanging there after the first episode. It's like,
yeah, there was another scene that it was brought up in, but I don't remember which episode. The Imzadi thing is brought up maybe one time, but it was really out of place, I remember, wherever it was.
Yeah.
It was one of the early episodes, like, here's a totally random scene that has nothing to do with anything. I think it was one of those.
Yeah, 'cause I only remember it in the very first episode when they were still setting up all the characters, and so it was just like, oh, well, I mean, I get the fact that, you know, they had some kind of relationship in the past, but what?
Yeah. So going off of your good thing on the development between their romances, I actually thought it was really silly and awkward and weird. Just because I appreciate that they actually tried to develop it a little bit instead of just leaving it out there. But I just felt like the way that they developed it was really just overall aimless and strange. So there's this scene, for anyone who hasn't seen this in a while, where it's just Riker and Troy down on Haven talking for a while. Or was it on the holodeck?
It was on the holodeck,
okay,
yeah.
I couldn't remember. So they're on the holodeck in the desert, hanging out, just the two of them. And so it makes it sound like they aren't together, but then they have this private discussion about how they feel about each other and how it will make the arranged marriage awkward. Then Riker calls her Imzadi, which means beloved. They get all intimate, but yet they're not, and then the conversation just doesn't go anywhere.
Because
why? It reminded me of Attack of the Clones romantic dialogue.
Yeah, and going off of that, like, one of my bads was just, a lot of the dialogue in this episode is really stilted and awkward. Like, just the way they talk about things, like, it's not even, like, you know, naturally awkward. It's just, like, badly written awkward, I guess. Like, overly...
It's all cornball.
Yeah, it's, like, overly wordy, like, you know, Wyatt saying, like, oh, I guess that's how marriage is, I suppose, or something, when they're talking about the fact that he wanted to be a doctor or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she was mentioning that, like, you know, she wanted to be a psychiatrist, and she's like, oh, yeah, maybe we could work in concert. And it was just very... The whole episode was just very awkward in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was wordy in an unintelligent way.
Yeah. Like, it was unnecessary.
I guess this is how this thing works, maybe, I suppose, perhaps. Yes.
Exactly.
Do
you have any other bads?
The episode is my bad.
Yeah. My other bad was just, this episode was boring as balls.
Yeah, it's one of the things where it's slow for no reason. They introduce this B-plot halfway through the episode of this tension with the unknown plague ship.
And then it just sort of disappears for about 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then it's resolved in the last 5 minutes.
Yep. It just kind of happens. And it's like, oh, hey, we're just going to, you know, sit here and, like, dwell on the bickering between the families.
Once I read that this was only the third episode created, it made sense, because the first 4 or 5 episodes were really rough with pacing.
Yeah, there were a lot of things. There were a lot of things in this episode that were just plain strange, and knowing that it was only the third episode ever produced.
Okay, I have to get this out. I have to get this out, Dylan. Okay, loyal listener people. There's a scene where they're having dinner with Troy's mom and her helper guy, and then Wyatt's parents, right? And they're talking. And then Troy loses her crap. And then, I don't remember if it's before or after that, though, there's a really weird scene that ties in where they're at this reception. and they start arguing again. I don't know if it was before or after. And then Picard comes in, and these people are fighting like crazy, and then Picard says, "I hereby declare all disagreements resolved." And I was like, I don't think that's how conflict resolution works.
Yeah,
that you can just walk in and say, "This is over now." And I don't remember if it was before or after the big fight at the dinner. Okay.
It's before, because they're arguing about the ceremony, I guess, because how the heck do you say your name? I forget how to say...
Loxana.
Yeah, her. She wants to do, like, a traditional Beta Z ceremony, like, full Beta Z, until they get into an argument, and yeah, Picard's just sort of like, "I declare everything resolved," and then everyone just starts talking like normal. It's like...
I'd love to try that in real life. If I have friends who are fighting, like a couple who's having a huge argument, I'll just walk in and say, "I hereby declare all disagreements resolved." That'll work so well.
Yep.
It made me laugh actually pretty hard. Yeah, I just can't remember the order in which these little squabbles take place because it's also boring. But that part was funny.
Because I remember specifically after Troy loses her shit and screams at everyone. Like the scene after that is the holodeck scene, and Wyatt says specifically that because of Troy losing it, they finally compromised into a half and half ceremony.
And then this other silly I have to get out too. There's this scene where it's really early in the episode, and it's Riker sitting in his quarters.
Oh, God.
And he looks like he's stoned or something. He's just relaxing, and he's watching these tiny little hologram women play harps.
Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed. What I took it as was like, it's just like these harp girls, and then it's him, and he's got like the creeper smile going on. It's like, what?
He's like, "I'm gonna tap that."
It's just...
But they're not even full-size holograms. They're little tiny harp ladies.
And it's just like, you sit back like, yeah.
And then he has to go and he's like, "Sorry, ladies." And they're like, "Oh my God, he's so creepy."
He is. He's just like leaning back going, "Yeah, I could get into this."
Like, if he had a magnifying glass and was looking around and saw an ant-sized woman, he'd be like, "Oh, hello, lady." He's such a creeper.
Yeah, there's a couple of, episodes in the first season where he just comes across... Or, it's like, they try to make him seem charming, but it comes across as just plain old creepy.
Borderline rapey. Yeah.
It gets a lot better later on.
The harp ladies, I just was laughing like crazy.
Yeah, I just paused the episode and was like, what did I just see?
So apparently, Dylan, in 400 years from now, when we want to relax, we'll just sit in our room and watch harp women.
Apparently so, yeah. I actually had more sillies than I did, good and bad combined.
Yeah.
So
it was a redeeming quality of the episode, because there's a couple of really slow ones early on that had no amusing parts, whereas this at least had funny stuff.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite as bad as, Code of Honor and Justice.
Mm-hmm.
But, my second silly after the Harp Girls hologram was... It was, immediately after it's when they're in the transporter room, and they transport up that, box face messenger thing.
Oh, God.
That thing was weird.
So that's in the very beginning of the episode when they first start beaming people up. For anyone who hasn't seen it in a while.
Yeah, the first thing they beam up is, this box. That almost
with a face.
Yeah, box with a face. It almost looks like it comes out of Star Wars or something, because it almost looks like someone's head in carbonite or something. And the moment Troy walks
terrible.
in, it opens its eyes and basically announces the arranged marriage between her and Wyatt. And then spits out a bunch of jewels and then shuts down again. And it was...
Fun trivia moment, that's actually Armin Shimmerman who plays Quark in DS9.
Oh.
And a bunch of other Ferengi. It's his only non-Ferengi role in the shows.
Yeah.
It just looked bad, too. I'm okay with the face box. But you could tell some dude was just crouching down with his head into some fabric.
Well, it's just completely bizarre, because there's no reason for it to exist. It's just
They could have just sent a message.
Yeah, it's unnecessarily, bizarre. Just to sell the fact that it's an alien custom or something.
I don't care who you are. You don't have a custom of, let's send messages with face boxes. and then have it spit out stuff at them. Yeah.
Yes, it was very, very weird.
Sorry, ladies.
Okay. Dang it, Tyler. And okay, another another silly I had, and I guess this could be kind of a silly bad. I don't know if you picked up on this, but there's a scene later on in the episode where they're finally talking about the Torellians and they're explaining everything about them. And in the middle of that scene, Picard walks over to his chair, and for one line, the audio quality suddenly changes.
It does, yeah. I forgot about that, but you're right.
Because I actually paused it and went back. I was like, did I hear that correctly? Because it's just like, blah, 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 wah, 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 blah, 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 blah. What? Did I just hear that?
Yeah.
It's almost like, I swear they redubbed his voice for that specific part or something. Because it seems, like, completely out of place. Like, either that
Sound a little quieter, Dylan.
What?
You sound slightly quieter, just so you know.
Probably because I wrote him.
Anyway.
But I was just saying that it almost sounds like they redubbed his voice, and then, or like he was like leaning into the room mic or something. But that doesn't make any sense because he sits down like where, that mic would probably be if there was one, and he sounds perfectly fine. So I can't understand in my head what happened there, but the audio quality suddenly dips.
The audio is really weird in a lot of the early episodes anyway, because in the later episodes, there's a really constant hum, the ship hum. And a lot of these early scenes don't have it, and they also don't seem to be wearing, I don't know what you call it, you would know because you work in new stuff, but the mics that people wear.
Oh, like the lapel mics or something?
There's just a weird audio quality to it where it sounds like they're talking to a mic that's like 15 feet away. In a lot of these scenes. So it already sounds weird, and then I noticed that, I forgot to write it down. So the production values are just really strange.
But yeah, knowing that this is the third episode they ever produced, it makes a lot of sense that they still weren't quite sure what's going on. So
I'm trying to think of anything else.
I only had like one other thing, and it was just a funny little bit. Data is super weird in this episode, but there's one specific part where, I guess one thing I didn't write down is like during that dinner scene where he's sort of like observing everything, he has a very like derpish look on his face whenever the camera cuts to him, and it really threw me off for quite a bit because it didn't really make any sense. But that wasn't the thing that I wrote down though. The thing I wrote down is after Troy like loses it and like storms out, knocking over that gong thing that the valet is hitting over and over again. Like there's just because what does she say? She says, "Can you please stop this petty bickering or something?" And she walks out, and there's like a moment of silence, and then Data like leaves it and goes, "Can you please continue the petty bickering? I find it most intriguing." I just burst out laughing because it was just so him.
Also, there's a scene in the like reception type of scene where Picard declares all conflicts resolved because he's apparently stupid in this episode. There's a part where Data is hanging out with Loxana's assistant, who is usually mute, and Data is watching him, and this dude just downs drinks, and I thought it was amusing.
Oh yeah, doesn't he like ask? Is part of your genealogy or something human? Because
apparently humans are associated with alcoholism. I don't know.
Yeah, he says some line about because I've seen you imbibe in these drinks a lot or something. Some weird line like that, and he just doesn't say anything, and Data just walks away like, oh. But yeah, Data is really just silly in this episode, which, again, being the third episode ever made, makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Well,
there's nothing else to really talk about, I don't think.
Yeah, this was just another one of those, like, slow-moving, boring episodes. Not particularly bad, but not good, either, I guess. Like,
it all comes back to that it was the third one produced, and it fits right in with those first 5.
Like,
where the B plot is only in maybe 10 minutes of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know how to plot stuff properly.
Yeah.
The characterizations are all over the place.
Yep.
And I'll just never get over the... I hereby declare all disagreements resolved. Like, who wrote that scene? I want to know.
There's a lot of this episode that's just awkwardly written, like we talked about earlier. But yeah, since it is like the third episode, I can see why that happened.
So, boring and slow, bad romance, bad character development, but has some laugh out loud moments.
Yep.
Not really intentionally.
I mean, some of it I could see being intentional, like Data asking if they could please continue the petty bickering. Like, someone had to intentionally write that, and that was pretty funny. But there are a lot of just, like, awkward, funny moments that you weren't really intended to be that way.
Yep.
So.
Alrighty.
Do you want to rate this episode, or should I?
You rate it first.
I rated a Z because it almost put me to sleep.
I was gonna do that. God damn it, Dylan. No, we both rated Z.
Z for Snortman.